Welcome back, everybody, to the final game of the semi-final of the VGC World Cup between France and Thailand. We've had a really long run. Of course, we saw Thailand be the victors pretty much at the very start, which I was quite surprised at, given France's show at the Worlds. But David, how do you feel about what we've seen come from the last match?
Well, I'm feeling pretty good. I mean, it's been like a roller coaster of a start. So, which I'm kind of really happy for because I suppose there's two things that could have happened. We could have had like a really close kind of set where like Thailand take a win, France take a win, and it just keeps going up until this point, which have been pretty hype for this match. But also like being able to see Thailand just kind of like dominate those first four games is also kind of like really cool to see. And now that we're seeing the rest of these matches, there's still kind of lots of talent from a lot of really cool players that we're still watching as well. So both in like ways have been like really nice. And I know we've been seeing like kind of France taking the wins on these, but as we've seen in previous weeks, Thailand's definitely take a back seat once they know they've clinched the win. And so like all these games are like all in this like exact order. So like it's you can see they've definitely taken a back seat, and we've already had previous players use the same team that they've used kind of like the previous week to kind of keep things nice and safe.
Yeah, it's always thing to play things nice and safe. Like I said, if you're on that back seat, you can play it safe, play something Doesn't matter if you've been scouted because you've already won the week. And of course, you have players who have using that kind of in the reverse, and they just scouted their opponents completely and flipped it over and used something completely different, which you saw in the first couple of games where they used that Kaige Velto team, which I was quite surprised. We haven't seen that very much since the Ultra Series back in 2019. And we also have some very surprising teams that both these players probably recognize. One played it twice now, and one, would have seen it at Worlds, and that is we're seeing Kutesh's team again, which did really well for like the weaknesses it has. But other than that, we can just see a quick overview of the semifinals here. We'll just get a quick recap of these teams. Anything that's caught your eye today, David? Of course, I was happy to see the Kyogre Yveltal call, but each of us might have our own little favorite thing.
Yeah, like Geiger Veltal has been like quite cool and like a little bit refreshing, I think, for some players to use, because you can often like run that physical Veltal, which does like so much damage into stuff that you're not used to it doing so much damage to, like other Kyogres, for instance. So I'm really liking both like that composition too, Connor. But I think kind of the spicy stuff that we saw like last week was pretty good. This week, I think we've seen a little bit more standard stuff. I appreciate Adam's effort to go for the Colossal. I don't think it paid off for him this time round, because I think he probably went up versus his arguably worst matchup, which is really unfortunate. But as you can see, France have been very much stuck with that Zacian, as we can see. And we'll see about whether that's the same for this match as well.
Yeah, hopefully France do follow suit. If they're going to go out on a high, they're going to go out of what they're known best for, and that is their French reign. They've always picked it up somehow, whether it be in Ultra Series, in the early 2020 formats, Shedinja and how. And Thailand, they're just a bit different because they've had, a different sort of circuit to us this year. They've kind of had that bit of a closed meta, so they've had to rely a lot on like the online features, or just working together, complete teamwork, and take information from this league to kind of, build a team that can either beat their opponents outright or just have a good matchup into everyone. And hopefully we can see that kind of come into fruition in this final game. Could Thailand take that 5-2 sweep, or are they going to be like, hey, 4-3, make it a nail biter, just not the biggest nail biter you've ever seen in the world.
Yeah, and make sure to check out the Victory Road of World Cup VGC to see the live, up-to-date Pokemon rosters and the match results as the stream goes. And that will be the same for next week as well for the final.
Yeah, always going to be great to go for a final, of course. Having all those updates go live as well, it's going to be really nice, kind of catch up. And other nice things that do come is we can see of our players here, and we see Florian that advantage, that step ahead in the 2023 season with a top 8 in the London Open, which is always really nice to top cut because it's hundreds of players who either didn't quite make day 2 or just there to visit and want a chance to play. And of course, we also have a Thailand Nationals top 4, which is that Worlds qualification coming from Panyawut, which isn't the end of the world. You've come top 4, but you've still got that seat in Worlds to represent your country.
Yeah, some great accolades from both these players here. Interesting. Florian we had a Cali Ice team for the top 8 in the Open, which was something that we haven't usually seen, and particularly paired with Groudon. So like a duo that I think a lot of players maybe thought would kind of take off at Worlds, but kind of fell a little bit flat when it actually came to the day one. So But I'm not sure if he's running it this time around. But both these players have like some pretty decent results for the World Cup of VGC as well. Florian in 2021 went 3-1. He's 2-3 this time round, but obviously he's here in top 4 for his French team, so he's doing excellent. And Panyawut was 6-2 last year, and being actually number 2 on like the entire roster, which is an amazing like accomplishment. And in this year, he's 3-2, so slightly up against Florian here. So he's looking to maintain that positive win rate in this World Cup of VGC.
Yeah, hopefully you can keep that nice and positive, and even having a positive result could be that little extra thing just save got that. As we can see, we have the teams on here on the screen again. So it's just the usual French range shenanigans with the Landorus, which normally is one that fluctuates the most. We did see Land last week in the World Cup. Sorry, I'm getting my words jumped up there. And then Panyawut just coming back with something they know well. They use that as well just to kind of carry themselves through against Poland. And they had a really successful win rate when they used that team then as well.
Yeah, Panyawut's keeping it safe, using the same team as last week, not revealing any extra information, knowing that he can just kind of play it out, have a good practice run, maybe try and boost up his score at the moment before like prepping and maybe trying on something new in the background for the finals, potentially, if he's picked for the roster. Whereas, yeah, on Florian's end, this is a quite successful team that the French contingent kind of like picked out and devised for the World Championships. Hippolyte and Thomas did fairly well with it. And that Landorus incarnate is not something that's often seen, but I believe it's probably a Salt Vest with that cheeky little grass knot, which may not come into play for this match, but a really cool pick for the late game meta.
Yeah, having grass up there is something really good. You can catch off both the common weather setting restricteds when they're in their base form, or you can have a nice strong max overgrowth to hit into when and where you can. As you do see the leads though coming off straight away are the double electric weak lead in the Yveltal plus the Gyarados, which is going to be really annoying if Florian maybe has changed Defiant Thunderous, but given the ability he's activating, I don't think it has got that ability. We'll have to see, whether it's just going to do its usual prankster shenanigans to stall this team out. Of course, Thunderous can't hit the Yveltal, but it can stall out that Gyarados. Gyarados is known to be one of the actual hidden powerhouses. Given the moves it can use, it has, see here, Waterfall and Stone Edge to kind of hit as many of the restricted Pokemon as possible. And it's going to be nice to see how it switches around, places itself to just kind of get a couple knockouts here and there throughout the rest of the game.
Yeah, so Florian's definitely going to wanting to put the pressure on with his electric type at the moment, threatening both these Pokemon with a lot of damage. However, we know the Thunderous is quite commonly on this composition is that more prankster kind of defensive variant. So Yveltal's probably still looking quite safe here to be able to like chip down the Incineroar a little bit with an Oblivion Wing, maybe go for a Foul Play, because Thunderous still does have a fairly high attack stat, even if it's not invested. So there comes the electric type attack into the Dialga switch-in. Snarl coming out to reduce further damage of that electric type move, because the Incineroar is likely going for a parting shot, but that remains to be seen.
Yeah, parting shot will be very nice because it can just situate the Incineroar in a position which makes it good for later in the game. Of course, getting that extra stat drop on the Yveltal is going to be really good as well, because you're bringing in one of your restrictors, such as maybe your Zacian, where the damage output isn't going to be as good, and you can just go for those Behemoth Blades and those Play Roughs, or you can go with your Kyogre, who's going to happily take weakened attack stat and just go with the flow and hit strong with its water attacks. Zacian is the choice to come in though, so it's going to be threatening down a lot of damage onto both of these Pokemon, as it has Play Rough at +1, it has its Sacred Sword at +1, and it has the ability to just kind of go back in and out of that Incin as and when it pleases, just in case it feels the Gyarados could come in, or just take a couple hits from these Pokemon that we can see in front of us.
I'd be curious to see what Florian's got in the back at the moment, because you could argue, oh well, he's bought his restrictors, Zacian and Kyogre, right? But like looking into Panyawut's team, like Kyogre is like especially into it in Assault Vest, Yveltal, and Dialga, which isn't weak to any of its moves, and a Ferrothorn. And especially if you're not the Thunder variant, which often you're not on that composition because you've got the Thunderous to the electric coverage, maybe more of a Mystic Water variant, you may not actually want to bring it here. So I wonder if we maybe got the Landorus Incarnate in the back as the kind of the Dynamax target to be able to clean up. And now Yveltal's come like back into the back. Landorus is looking quite good if it's able to come in and start quaking in front of this Dialga, because it's going to do a lot of damage and it's going to produce a piece of depth, so you can be able to take its attacks even better. But Dialga is going for the Dynamax here on Panyawut's end, a pretty reliable Dynamax target, and turning all of its like amazing coverage into really reliable, hard-hitting moves.
Yeah, that's just one of the things that Dialga does like to do. It likes to have all those buffs from its its attacks, and to just either buff its own stats or drop its opposing stats. Of course, you know, now that we know there is a prankster version of the Thunderous, he can happily go for max Wormwinds to drop the attacks out on Zacian, and also gets, given how strong Dialga can be. But we just see a max heal spike come out though, and does enough damage to that Zacian and buffs its defense stat, which indirectly is going to be a little better than getting attacked, because it is going to have over time the ability to stack up its stats and sit there, especially with Ferrothorn next to it, which can have that body press, which is going to be really, really nice, because it means you don't have to kick Iron Defense as many times, and you get that strong set of damage output pretty much off the get-go. And then Dialga again can just sit there with how powerful it is, just take some Pokemon out, get some knockouts, and be a fearful dragon type in front of whatever can come in from the back once that Zacian is gone.
Yeah, once the Zacian's gone, Sacred Sword is off the field, and it could be looking pretty nice. However, on Florian's end, the Thunderous may have Taunt. It sometimes does carry that. Sometimes you may have it over Grass Knot. There's a few moves that Thunderous definitely wants to carry. But the Taunt is something that could really shut this Ferrothorn down. But we don't see the Landorus, we do see the Kyogre that has come in. So despite Iron Defenses, if this Kyogre is able to like Dynamax start going for geysers, they're still going to do a huge amount of damage to a Ferrothorn. And plus this Eerie Impulse means that Florian's doing an excellent job of like stalling out the Dynamax. And he's preserved his Zacian, which is, I think, a really nice play here. Whether Dialga calls the Protect or not, you know you're keeping it safe in the back.
Yeah, it's always good to keep your Pokemon safe in these sort of situations, especially when both of the restricted Pokemon are able to just, you know, pivot and do the shenanigans they always like to do. Of course, though, Dialga will just completely reign strong in this situation because it's giving those defense buffs, whether that be special or physical, to the Ferrothorn, and Ferrothorn just loves to have those boosts, and also just gives you that pathway to, you know, kind of pick out what you want to knock out and what you want to, you know, kind of slow down. We did just see a hover of the Max Rockfall, which is also going to indirectly slow down the Kyogre by getting rid of its rain and giving it a bit of chip damage as well, which is going to be very annoying given its main attack relies on how much HP it has. But we do just see a switch out, and the Incineroar will come and get some Intimidates down, but neither of these Pokemon are really bothered by that. Ferrothorn, of course, will have that body press, can just go for that without worrying about an attack stat. And then, of course, Dialga being a special attacker is just going to start throwing. Do see the Taunt though coming out, which is going to be a little bit of a hindrance to that Ferrothorn, because it is going to be unable to set up its body press boosts with the Iron Defense, and can't Leech Seed for that slow game towards the end of it.
Something that I really want to comment on is like this Dialga's been Eerie Impulsed like once or twice at the moment, and it's just still doing like so much damage. Like it's such a strong Pokemon, and like this Thunderous is like, I think, trained pretty like vocally as well. So like despite that, it's still putting in a lot of work and chunking Florian's team a lot here. Incineroar does fortunately get, for Florian anyway, get in quite safely here. Quake could have easily maybe gone into that Kyogre there to kind of boost up your Spectre there, for like to be able to take it on a little bit better, but Incineroar kind of gets in scot-free now, and Florian, still with all four of his Pokemon left and his Dynamax in the back, is looking quite strong. I think even though he's taunted the Ferrothorn still has had a boost or two, so you definitely still want to get your Zacian in a safe position to be able to Sacred Sword it, to be able to whittle it down, because Incineroar is in and threatening Fire-type damage, but it still might not be doing too much damage based for all the defense boosts that Ferrothorn now has. But the ball is definitely on Florian's court, and he definitely has all the pieces to be able to maneuver this position into what he wants, now that this Dialga is just not really much of an offensive threat, especially the Dynamax now has gone.
With Dynamax gone, Dialga does lose a few of its. Luckily, it has the option to get rid of that Fungus Stone, I believe that was the Ancient Power, so we could maybe see the Omni boost a little bit down the line if Panyawut is lucky. But as you said, you know, once that Zacian comes in front of Pokemon, it's going to be very annoying to deal with. You see the Flare Blitz does get knocked out on the Ferrothorn because there's no rain set up. That means it's just going to go down straight away, and the double recoil from the Iron Buffs with the Flare Blitz is going to be annoying in return, but it's a worthy trade-off given you got rid of one of the Pokemon that could have been a detriment to your game plan if it stayed bulky. Of course, if Zacian does come in here, Gyarados will also be coming in, or just to get Intimidate down. And it's also got a nice little move pool there to try and kind of knock out the Incineroar if it needs to be. You can deal with the Kyogre with the Power Whip, which is a very nice addition to Gyarados' move pool in these recent generations. It gives you that option to kind of attack into Water type without relying on its really shaky flying type stab. Have to see how Florian kind of navigate of the Gyarados, given that both these Pokemon have the ability to just tap either of these Pokemon and get a nice chunk of damage to them, if not a knockout, especially with that rain setup. I mean, Waterfall is even more powerful.
Yeah, so even though like the Thunderous has now kind of gone down on, if you're like from Panyawut's perspective, your Ferrothorn has also gone down, which is probably your main way of kind of dealing with this Kyogre, because you had there was a Spadef boost on that as well, so it was looking like really good into that endgame. But unfortunately, because he went for the Rockfall to take out the Thunderous, it meant swapping out the rain for that sand, and therefore the Incineroar could knock out your Ferrothorn. So there was a slight little bit of anti-synergy there, unfortunately, that's kind of like made Ferrothorn, your kind of really solid answer, go down. However, Yveltal does come in. It's pretty bulky and probably naturally outspeeds this Kyogre. So if it's able to get off like a couple of snarls, Panyawut still might be in this to be able to stall out Florian's Dynamax as well, because he's got a fair amount of things that resist the hits. But what I'm kind of interested to see here is Florian has an electric move on his Kyogre, because if he does, then he's looking pretty strong into what Panyawut has here.
Yeah, if he has an electric move, that is kind of just a comfy little end game there for getting rid of the Gyarados, and it gets rid of the Yveltal after a couple turns. If not, Max Geyser in the high, the special attack boost will do some nice damage. You do see even to a water type, it does loads of damage without any crit hits or buffs besides the stab and the rain. Of course, Gyarados, still takes it a comfy amount and can possibly retaliate later. But now that Zacian has come in after the Intimidate has gone off on the Gyarados, it's going to be hard to pivots to kind of bring Gyarados back into a situation where it can start hitting either of these Pokemon. Waterfall might take out Zacian from here if it's got the rolls on it, or could possibly just start pocketing down this Kyogre, getting some power ups on it. It's weaker when it comes to using Water out, meaning the other Pokemon can live that a little bit more down the line.
Well, so now Kyogre's gone for the Dynamax, and Zacian is in. It's looking really tough for Panyawut, especially seeing how much water-type damage that just did to Gyarados. Like, there's got to be at least like Mystic Water to be doing that, because Gyarados' like special defense is actually pretty good here. We haven't seen like a lot of like speed control at all this like entire game really. There's been like no airstreams, like no thunder waves going around. Everything's just kind of like sitting at its base speed and just like relying on its bulk to be able to take a hit and dish its hit back out. But the play rough, what was going to the Yveltal, goes straight into the Dialga, hits and takes it straight down too. Gyarados going for that waterfall into the Zacian, boosted by the rain, is enough to be able to pick up that KO. So, and critically outspeeding that Kyogre too, which is quite a good piece of information to note. Max Geyser though is the second choice of move again, going straight into that Gyarados. So now it's just Yveltal left down on the field. If it's able to stall out a few turns of that Dynamax, it might be able to take things out, heal up a little bit of that Oblivion Wing, but it remains to be seen how much like damage it can only take from this Kyogre, which is just dishing out so much damage.
Yeah, Kyogre is being a very, very big threat to this side of the game now. Of course, Yveltal has the ability to start healing back. If that's the option it goes with. Could also go for the Snarls, so we see Panyawut hovering over just to get those. And with the Assault Vest and the Rain, it's going to see what combination of bulk to damage output goes through, as it just gets a clean knockout there. A critical hit, which might have been a bit of an annoying thing for Panyawut, maybe normally living. And then Oblivion Wing back to get that HP. But unfortunately, it does go in the favor of Florian, giving him the crit to get that game one wrapped up, which could mean France could maybe free. And, have a little bit of that consideration, towards the end of the match. But like, hey, we still got those 3 games against a very, very strong Thailand.
Yeah, so like quite a commanding, just bring in Kyogre, click water button, and just like blowing stuff up, which kind of worked out there. I'd be curious to like see what the calculation of that Max Geyser on the list, probably quite bulky assault vest Yveltal is, as it was probably going to live. I wonder that, and then you go for a Snarl, and then are you able to take then another hit? Maybe you might have to rely maybe an Origin Pulse Miss or something, and then start Oblivion Wing. I'm not sure, like even without that crit, whether like Panyawut still had it or not. Pretty much mainly because that Yveltal was like slower. It just wasn't be able to like Snarl and take that Vex Geyser away. Couldn't protect to be able to stall it out either. So it was kind of over from there. So going into game 2, I kind of like to see how Panyawut maybe uses a little bit of speed control potentially, maybe brings his own Thunderous potentially to kind of help out with that. To kind of get the jump on the Zacian and the Kyogre, which seems to just kind of outspeed everything and just like hit really hard. Because the Ferrothorn didn't seem to go super well there, and it wasn't even the Sacred Sword Zacian that dealt with it.
Yeah, it was really annoying to see Ferrothorn go down, get those defense boosts, and even in front of an Incineroar, it takes like at most 50% and then retaliates with the body press. So maybe we're going to see the change up and have it Ferrothorn maybe save for the back in the end game, and maybe threaten the Shedinja a little bit if it also comes, or just getting super bulky with body press and letting its ability take it out naturally, which is something we did talk about behind the scenes of how that catch the switch in very well or force the vacuum on. But we do see here though a bit of a change up straight away with the Dialga and Thunderous in front of a Thunderous and so it's going to be, you know, a little bit of a mirror who's going to have the faster Thunderous. We'll see which one. So you got to kind of think, you know, do I have to Dynamax straight away to mitigate the fake out? Do I have to predict it's going to fake out Thunderous and just go switch that? There's just so many different options that can go through the player's heads right now. You see Dialga is the option to switch out, and Landorus coming, which is going to drop an Intimidate on the Incineroar, which is a nice little attack drop because if it goes for a Flare Blitz, you're taking less damage, and also a very nice call if we see maybe a Thunderbolt or anything else going into the slot that was a Dialga, as Fake Out does go into that Thunderous, and we see Aerial Pulse does come through and go into the Landorus, so taking that nicely because it's ground type, it's a physical attacker, it's not really caring about any like weird special attacks throughout the rest of the game.
Yeah, really like this adjustment from Panyawut here. He brings in the Thunderous to be able to potentially deal with the opposing Thunderous with like taunts and Yuri impulses to be able to reduce that electric type pressure. And crucially as well, Florian, instead of going for that kind of like safe parting shot, which you know kind of it's pretty good roulette regardless of what you do, like you reduce damage, you get a safe switch into something, he actually goes for that fake out. And even though it went into the Thunderous, it means that Panyawut gets in his Landorus really like for free pretty much, which is looking so good in front of both of these Pokemon. He can go for a lot of damage output again with his Earthquake, which does reveal the Shuka Berry, but it's still a really key like move that he can now go for. And as you can see, it's actually, if that berry kind of does get used up, it's doing a decent chunk of damage. Parting Shot, it does now come out here, but Incineroar has taken a lot of damage now from there. And Panyawut's Thunderous being a little bit faster than Florian's Thunderous, at least as far as we know, could be a speed tie. This has been really key too, because he's now completely shut down Florian's way of dealing with the damage output from Dialga and from any sort of speed control that it can throw out too.
Yeah, getting rid of like the speed control options and also the ability to drop stats is going to be very good. Of course, Incineroar is still in the back there and can happily switch in on this Landorus a couple times to get his attack dropped. Of course, I do believe this might actually be a choice band Landorus, which means that even if the attack drops, it's still going to have a little bit of attack behind it to do damage throughout the rest of the game, and could quite easily switch into any of the Pokemon because, you know, they're going to like to take these water attacks from the Kyogre, and I can quite easily see maybe a pivoting around the Ferrothorn while the rain is still. Make sure that Incineroar, if it does come back in, gets his attack drops, and making sure, and also having that rain buff to do a nice chunk.
Ferrothorn's looking pretty safe as switching here, especially with Fury Impulse damage control it's got now. So definitely has the opportunity to start setting up those iron defenses, setting up those leech seeds to be able to potentially maneuver into like a late game position where it's just stalling everything out. Origin Pulse, though, is the move of choice that comes out. And thanks to Aerial Pulse, Thunderous yet again hangs on, and the Citrus Berry makes it a little bit more healthy. and it can potentially take another hit with potentially more Eerie Impulses that can come out. So the leftovers is the item on the Ferrothorn, being able to heal up a little bit more. However, the taunt timer is ticking down on that opposing Thunderous, and that's going to mean that on Panyawut's end, he's going to have to taunt that again if he wants to deal with it. So, like, although he's positioning himself well, he's not actually dishing out a lot of damage right now. And so maybe a switch into this potential Diagonal Landorus to be able to dish out that damage is going to be what Panyawut needs to do to be able to push this game forward.
Yeah, Panyawut can quite easily bring in the Dialga, and it hasn't got the fear of it. Take a nice chunk, take damage nicely from the Kyogre, but it does go protect just to kind of preserve itself, maybe try and call Eerie Impulses, and then it just gives Ferrothorn the free reign, go for those Leech Seeds, get its stat boost up if it wants to, and either way it's going to use its natural longevity and bulkiness to try and force switches, force movement, or any moves to kind of get knockouts as a...
Yeah, so we're now kind of in that position where Thunderous has shook off the taunt, and kind of same back in the game 1 position, but just a few turns later, where Thunderous can now just Eerie Impulse Dialga and taunt Ferrothorn again. So as long as Florian has that kind of Zacian Sacred Sword in the back, or slash that Incineroar to be able to deal enough damage to this Ferrothorn once, say, a Rock Ball's gone up from Dialga, which it's kind of forced to do to deal with Thunderous, then it's kind of that same position now. So Panyawut, I would like to see maybe switching that Thunderous again to be able to help deal with this Florian's Thunderous as well, because otherwise he's just going to fall behind and like waste his Dynamax turns again. But he is going for it this time, maybe hoping for, despite an Eerie Impulse, he might be able to just get the KO on this Thunderous and potentially then not get a taunt on your Ferrothorn, or potentially bait the taunt on his own Ferrothorn and not completely get away with damage from the Dialga. But remains to be seen what happens this turn as Florian switches in his Incineroar too.
Yeah, Incineroar coming in again isn't the end of the world. It's kind of just gonna, sit and do things, maybe irritate the Ferrothorn a little bit and cause it to want to switch out further more. With the rocks going, with the rockfall happening and the sand going up, it is going to mean that it hasn't got that protection of the rain, but at the same time, it does put that presence out where it can't be taunted if it hits. It can't be, it can put pressure on the Incineroar with like Quakes or another rockfall. So, it's not the scariest situation.
Yeah,
a bit harder to delete.
Exactly. So Leech Seed comes out onto the Incineroar now. Sand does chip things down, but yeah, we're in like the same kind of position. Sand's now set up because, like, to deal with the Dialga, you need to go for that rock. To deal with the Thunderous, you need to go for that Rockfall. But Incineroar is now in, threatening that Flare Blitz, and further taunts from the Thunderous can come out, and even more so Eerie Impulses, and the Thunderous is still going to live those hits. So you might be on Panyawut's end to potentially go for that body press, except you're going to get taunted, take out that Thunderous, and that's going to help your Pokemon in the back a little bit more. Or you go for the offensive with the Dialga, go for some Quakes, get some special defense boosters up, so that at least you'll be able to take on the Kyogre that then eventually comes in, especially if your Dialga is able to outspeed the Incineroar before it goes for that Flare Blitz. Oh, and there's the Thunder Wave miss as well, so this is really big, I think.
Yeah, the Thunder Wave miss is quite big, and that could cause the Speed Stiff to have a bit of disruption compared to what Florian would have wanted. And that max, I believe that was a max Quake, given the stat boost, is going to grab a knockout on the Incineroar, believing this berry has been used up. And that means it's, the special defense boost is going to be really nice on the Ferrothorn too, because it's going to have even more longevity to set up its body presses and stuff, which in past times, I've spoken to players about this team, they said Ferrothorn needs a special defense boost to take on Kyogre, given you can just get, go big, you can use Mystic Water boosted attacks. That can be very scary, and the Thunderous being Leech Seed as well just puts it on a timer, whether that be it's a timer where it's forced to be switched out, or it's on a timer where it's taking more and more damage over time with the sand and with the Leech Seed. So, Ferrothorn could be doing Ferrothorn things. The game as a Zacian is before it can get its body presses off.
Yeah, so even though you've got the special defense boost, you've not got any defense boosts yet. There's been no Steel Spikes, there's been no Iron Defenses. So Florian here can kind of safely go for just another Eerie Impulse into Dialga and a Sacred Sword into Ferrothorn, so that because Dialga's already been Eerie Impulsed. So Zacian's, even if it's going to get quaked by Dialga, it's not going to do a whole lot of damage, and it probably gives you more than one opportunity to get more Sacred Swords off. So it's still a tough position for Panyawut. it was great that he avoided the Thunder Wave, but he's still the slower Pokemon at the end of the day. And speed control is a huge thing in this game, and especially when you're trying to deal with the threats that then threaten your own Ferrothorn. But Kyogre now is the switch in here. It's going to set up the rain, and it's going to get Thunder straight out. So obviously, he's maybe a little bit confident that his Zacian is going to live. Ferrothorn goes through a Protect, so let's see where the Zacian is attacking.
Yeah, Zacian goes into the Dialga, it seems, and gets a critical hit. That is not enough to get the knockout, even like Quiz of the Dynamax. The Max Whelmwind will come out and go into that Kyogre. It's not going to bother the Kyogre too much. The damage is nice for the Dialga because it gets a lot down. But Kyogre is a special attacker. It's not going to mind it. But what is going to mind it is that Zacian. And Zacian is now being put, in a position where, is it going to be forced to do a couple switches? Is it going to have to live with it and have its weakened stats? It's so many different ways that Panyawut is now putting pressure on and doing what this team does, causing stats to be dropped or risen as and where needed to leave the Pokemon to a super bulky to do lots of damage.
And now we've seen that the Zacian kind of like maybe called the defensive play on Panyawut's end. That Protect on Ferrothorn is going to cost him now because Florian can kind of go for a Sacred Sword and like Water Spout or Max Geyser, as we might just be able to see once again. So he's going to do a lot of damage out. And this Dialga has one hit left in it thanks to its Life Orb. And it's already been Eerie Impulse so much, so it's looking like pretty weak in front of what Florian's got. So he can just safely double the Ferrothorn right now, especially now it's protected, and just deal with the threat that it's sitting there now. And it's Dialga, if it does anything, it's also going to go down. So there's the Sacred Sword that we do see revealed. Now it's only on neutral attack. It's actually a 3-hit knockout at the moment, so which is quite key information if Panyawut's able to take this out. Roar of Time is the move that goes into Kyogre, doing a decent chunk, to be fair, for like the stats that it's been at. But Kyogre now comes out with the Hailstorm this time into the Ferrothorn, changing the weather as well, which I like if Incineroar's going to come into, get some more chip down to kind of cancel out that leftovers. So Ferrothorn is alive, but it's looking pretty threatened right now. But the Leech Seed comes out for a little bit more health.
Yeah, the Ferrothorn, it's sitting there comfortably. The Dialga going down is a bit annoying because that strong Pokemon that was threatening a lot of damage out has been neutralized, and it means that Ferrothorn is going to sit here mostly by itself. But it has the moves, it has the time to get its health back, to get its stats up to a decent position. Do see the Leech Seed and the leftovers coming in very well there. So it's going to come down to the Intimidates from the Landorus and also Eerie Impulses from the Thundurus, which, given the speed and the presence they have compared to the opposing Pokemon, they can most likely do it. Landorus, being that choice band, is going to do a lot of damage to both these Pokemon. If it goes to maybe an Earthquake, you can always see a Protect call from the Ferrothorn just to kind of be like, hey, I can, Protect and an Earthquake with a choice band. It's not going to matter there's that 3-way spread. It's still going to do a lot of damage if needed. We do see, though, Thundurus could be coming in just to kind of go with that Protect, just to make sure you're bringing Ferrothorn back in, get some healing on your Thundurus too, so give it about that little bit of loop to make sure all your Pokemon are healthy and it can do the bulky things this team loves to do. And we can see Panyawut maybe bringing this to a 1-1 if things go in their favor with the Leech Seeds, with the stat drops, with all the calls. As we do see Thundurus come in, though, will be a bit of a hindrance to this Earthquake now coming off.
It looks like both players don't want to kind of play the Protect mind game right here, like because you could have like Zacian Protect from this incoming Earthquake, you could have Ferrothorn Protect from the incoming Sacred Sword. Both players are like, nope, they're just switching to their Thundurus instead. But yeah, that choice band is coming in clutch right now because that just destroyed the Kyogre that was Dynamax and a fair amount of health. And I don't think a non-choice band could have done anything less. So we do see the Hail chip down, again revealing that Panyawut's Thundurus seems to be the faster one here, which is really key in this mirror match for the two Thunduruses. However, Zacian now does come in, and I think Florian kind of knows, probably is familiar with the team, knows the Landorus is probably choice band, so it's a safe target if he so wants to dish out that Behemoth Blade. And I think Landorus does need some bulk to be able to live a +1 Behemoth Blade, which it is now being threatened by. However, Panyawut's end does potentially have some speed control. If you've got the Thunder Wave, you can slow down that Zacian pretty handily, and you're at no risk of being taunted from the following turn because you're probably faster too. So it's kind of in Panyawut's corner at the moment, assuming he hits his moves.
Yeah, it'll come down to who hits the moves. Of course, Thunder Wave can't go into the Landorus, so that's something that you don't really have to worry about. Irium it's only really annoying the Thunder isn't known to be a special attacker. It's known to have the special attacks, but it's known more to just click buttons, have fun, and go with the flow of the game. The Landorus, though, is just putting so much pressure out. If you can catch the Zacian at the right time, whether that be with a Thunder Wave, whether that be with your attack drops, it can be very fun. As Taunt does come out from Florian's, which could be really annoying for like the speed tiers. You see Sacred Sword goes into the Ferrothor, gets the knockout, so a good call from the Zacian there just to kind of cover as many bases as possible. And it is going to mean that the Landorus is coming in slower. The Thunderbolt comes out.
What the play by like Florian there, it's so easy to just click that Behemoth Blade button, but he calls the Ferrothorn switch in, goes to that Sacred Sword, which was no way KOing that Landorus, completely kind of saying, right, Panyawut, it has the obvious kind of speed control plus Earthquake play, but he's like, nah, way too obvious, he's not going to go for that, so I'm going to make the read on top of that, and yeah, he absolutely calls it that time, and even goes for the taunt onto the faster Thunderous, so now in the subsequent turn, kind of maybe even calling that Thunderbolt, that it can't now go for the speed control it had before. However, it is still looking pretty dicey now that Landorus is back in with that Intimidate, but at least Florian kind of did his best that turn to be able to pull out there's at least the best kind of end game he can. So Landorus can only go for the Earthquake at the moment. That's all it needs to do. It needs to just do enough damage to be able to get that KO, and the Hail Chip may even ensure it puts it in range. But it's going to be up to Florian now. He has the speed control, maybe even now need a critical hit to be able to dish the rest of this damage out.
Getting a damage out is going to be very important for this state of the game. Of course, given what's on the field, we can't see any Thunder Waves because of the Taunt. We have to rely on maybe a Thunderbolt paralysis, but that is asking for a miracle in most cases. See, the Behemoth Blade goes to Landorus. It lives on 18. Now, see how much this Earthquake does. It has Choice Band. It doesn't affect that Thunderous because of the... It could put Zacian into the knockout zone. It does knock out Zacian, meaning that we're going to be going to a game 3 here, and it's going to be very, very close. We see 5-2, from Thailand, or will it be just a little clean 4-3, coming close, but no cigar in that situation?
Yeah, so an interesting kind of turnaround there. I really like the adjustments Panyawut made, to be honest. Like, bringing that Landorus, as we saw, was a really key piece to be able to deal with that Zacian and kind of help the Ferrothorn actually live the Sacred Swords, because that is one way of you can't boost up with Iron defenses versus it, which we saw it not do. But instead, it got the Spadef boost to be able to take some of Kyogre's hits a little bit better. And then, thanks to the Intimidates, it got some Leech Seeds out to be able to kind of chip down and just kind of focus a lot of the pressure that Florian was kind of dishing out. So, because he knew he had to target it to deal with it. Kind of like we've had a Colossal before, where you feel like you have to respect it sometimes because of the threat. If you leave it for too long, it'll set up and destroy your team. So, I really like the adjustments there. Now, does Florian adjust himself? Because that slower Thunderous was really really not amazing versus the other Thunderous, but it's been working out for him, and I feel like with a slight few adjustments he could have maybe taken that game, just maybe not necessarily leading it, especially now that he knows that Taunt is there. He didn't particularly use Incineroar either because the Gyarados didn't come, so basically both players could mix it quite up here.
Yeah, both players have the freedom to mix it up. Of course, given the team style that we are seeing from Panyawut, it is going to be, the option to go with anything really, and it is going to be a bit of a funky situation. That was why David Kutage at the World Championships built a team in that way. So it was like, you can bring anything and it could really put your opponent off guard and even tilt them in occasions with how bulky you are, compared with also having that strength. Dialga being that thing, glued together, super strong, but also super bulky. And you'll see what it does this turn. You see the kind of somewhat mirrored lead again on this first turn with the Dialga and the Thunderous in front of and an Incineroar.
Yeah, so sticking with the tried and tested kind of safe Thunderous Incineroar lead, which I like, you've got Eerie Impulse to control special attackers, you lead Intimidate to control physical, So it's a nice safe lead, you can pivot out with Parting Shot, so it makes a lot of sense. It's kind of that Charizard Grimmsnarl lead, from the Rinnia Sun. It's just nice and safe to deal with what you need to do. And having Shuka Berry means you can take the Quake from Dialga. So It gives Florian a lot of options. He doesn't feel like he needs to kind of make reads right from the get-go. So we see Panyawut not go for the Dynamax this time, going straight for that Power Gem. Obviously, with reduced damage here, because you're not using the Max Rock Ball, but it still means that you can kind of switch around and do what you need to do to get around that damage reduction that Florian's been pretty good at doing before. However, Parting Shot does go into the Dialga, so it's now looking pretty weak already, and Florian can bring in something maybe like that Zacian, and then switch in his Incineroar to lower the damage output from the Landorus, to be able to deal the damage onto Dialga. So, out of this game one, I think both players are still positioning to get that right position.
Yeah, both players are trying to find their feet a little in this matchup. Of course, they're going to have to move fairly, at a fair pace, because they're going to have to try and what I have. My opponent knows what I know what my opponent has, so they're going to have to really work out, when those assets will come together and it will be good for them to kind of work out what's best and what pattern to go with. Of course, right now we can see, Dialga really likes taking hits from the Kyogre. The Thunderous, looks like it's just being forced to switch out, bring Instant in, which isn't the scariest for this Dialga being a special attacker. Landorus is going to be a bit... I've got my attack stat dropped again.
So Dialga, I think a fair switch out there. I mean, it could have just kept getting Eerie Impulsed and into the Ferrothorn, which is looking quite nice right now. U-turn is the option for this Landorus, which I like as well, doing a pretty good chunk actually to that Kyogre, despite the Incineroar coming in and intimidating it, showing this maybe the Kyogre's not too bulky, maybe got a decent amount of speed there, as we have seen it outspeed the Beltal as well at Panyawut had fought in that game one. But Dialga is now back in thanks to that rotating Dora Pokemon, but coming into a Water Spout, not full health, but it does a huge chunk of damage there, bringing Dialga under half of its HP. Ferrothorn is sitting fairly nicely. It could probably take a Flare Blitz for this Incineroar, but Dialga is in now, and it's unchecked by a potential Thunderous. So I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see a Dynamax off that Dialga, so you can hopefully take a little more hits from the Kyogre, maybe get some Quake Boost on that Ferrothorn, and start setting up.
Yeah, it's getting set up with that Ferrothorn is going to be something that Florian will have to out for. It is going to be really annoying if it does get set up, because, Panyawut just wants to have it set up. The 3 games they've gone for the going with Ferrothorn and get bulky and then win the late game, but in 3 games, it hasn't gone all too well. We saw it kind of happen in the last game, so I'll see what comes from the this, and we have to see what happens from here on out as we see the Incineroar is switching out, bringing in the Zacian, which it's not going to mind the 2 Pokemon on the field. Yes, it can deal with the Ferrothorn, and it can kind of deal with the Thunderous. It's not going to be overly annoyed by it, and we'll see a Dynamax happening. I do believe that is the Kyogre going big, which is going to be pressuring loads and loads of damage.
Yep, so the tried tested Kyogre, guys, if there's anything that you've learned from VGC 2022 at the moment, is that Kyogre is a good Pokemon. So we go to the Dynamax, it's in the rain, and it's going for a Hailstorm, and it's probably going to do a huge chunk of damage to this incoming Thunderous right now. Yep, just that is a clean 1-hit KO there, actually. Despite being that kind of prankster Thunderous, which is usually that more bulky, completely goes down here thanks to Kyogre's just aggressive offensive stats. Ferrothorn is still sitting here now. It's going for the Leech Seed. It's going to start healing up a little bit, but it's got no special defense boost to kind of take yet, and the Zacian is now in here, and there's no kind of Thunderous to slow it down with a scary face, which we've kind of seen Panyawut potentially kind of hovering over in the previous games. So the question is, can Ferrothorn kind of stall this out at the moment? And it's kind of Florian's now on that timer where his Kyogre has a lot of damage there, and can basically Panyawut stall it out and reduce the damage to let it live a little bit longer.
Yeah, it's going to have to come down to going with the stalling mode of this team yet again, and it's a bit annoying though for Panyawut. Oh, and we do have a disconnect as well there. I have just been seen in our little director's chat over here that Panyawut did give the win to Florian, given the game state, and maybe just being a bit friendly, like, hey, we've already won the week. Here, have the win. So that will mean it does go for free to France, and no, to Thailand, sorry, and France get that little win at the end, just seal things up. So congratulations to them, and even bigger congratulations to Thailand, playing it out to the end, being nice competitors.
Yeah, I think if you're in that like board game state where you've been through 2 games of that already, or if you're just trying to set up your Ferrothorn and like potentially get up some leech seeds, iron defenses, and like Panyawut can kind of see from what the board game state and what he has is just not quite enough. You know, like he can bring his Landorus, but he knows that down the line, Florian's going to just switch out his Zacian, reset the Intimidate, bring it in at a more safe time. Like he's kind of always kind of playing one turn behind, and I like totally get that, and you can definitely see the writing on the wall after a couple of games there. I mean, like with a few critical hits and things, maybe things could have gone differently, but I can see why like he doesn't really want to play to that end. You know, like it's like the week's decided, so like you want to give it to like the player who seems to be playing better and things like that. So it's a fair like way to kind of end things really. Like, and it does take the down to a 4-3 to Thailand. So another kind of close set for France, but no cigar this time around. Thailand are the victorious ones for this week and are going into the final to potentially face either Canada or Australia.
Yeah, it's going to be great seeing who they go up against and taking down a powerhouse, especially in the VC 2022 format. France, I thought, given how far they could take it all the way, they've been powerhousing the entirety of this year. They had a great turnout of Worlds, of course, the Hip Elite coming second seed, going into the first wave of Top Cut at the World Championships, and then the rest of them kind of just having good finishes all throughout tournaments. And, it'll be nice to see how they take that further. Maybe they're, practicing on and on for the Scarlet and Violet tournament. See, what sort of pace they set. And we can see here as well, just a quick overview of the matches, so it's a nice little bit of a division, we could say. You got the 2-1, 2-1, 2-1, 2-1, 2-0 at the top there, and then the last ones, France, and they had some nice little wins going forth. Fortunately, the last one had in the default win, but it's still nice to clasp it back at the very end.
Absolutely is, exactly. So what a stream we've had today, and like we're gonna have all the more hype of that tomorrow as well with the Canada versus Australia match. So definitely stay tuned for that. So but be sure to definitely follow us like at Victory Road on Twitter, on YouTube, on Twitch, and through Discord, as you can see on your screen right now, where you get all of the live updates on the website. The Pokemon updates are still going. On Twitch, we'll obviously be here tomorrow, and you're here now. Congrats to you. And on YouTube, there are all the previous kind of matches that you've been seeing, so you can look up your favorite player, see how they're doing, like follow them a little bit longer, see what teams they've been using, and then just check out Twitter for all those updates of when we're posting and when we're going live.
Yeah, just always make sure to keep up to date to all those links, because you get to see everything and anything that pretty much happens. And of course, one thing to remember is none of this would be possible without the help from our amazing sponsors over at Metafee, GT Tour, and Elgato. Of course, they help us with a lot of our, and also a lot of like the website hosting, pretty much done, with the help of them. And of course, the Victory team as well are absolutely amazing, and using what they get given and what they get assisted with to bring it all together.
Yeah, and remember, so tomorrow we are starting at 2 p.m. UTC time for the final of the semifinals for this week. Canada versus Australia. Who of those will be facing Thailand next week? So from all of us at Victory Road, thank you very much for tuning in, and we shall all see you tomorrow.